A single stick planted in the earth once guided the construction of entire empires. Ancient surveyors mastered a forgotten science, using nothing more than shifting shadows to design cities with breathtaking precision. By the end of this story, you will know the secret language of sunlight that dictated the layout of temples and palaces for millennia. We will uncover how they achieved such accuracy without modern tools, and why some of their alignments remain perfect mysteries. What does it say about us that we lost such an elegant connection to the sky that celestial map was drawn with a single, simple tool? The gnomon was nothing more than a vertical rod, a stake driven firmly into level ground. Yet in the hands of a skilled observer, this humble object became a powerful scientific instrument. Its shadow, cast by the sun, was a moving needle on a sundial the size of the world. The key was not just watching the shadow move, but understanding its language. The tip of that shadow would trace a smooth, curving path throughout the day. In the morning, the long shadow would point far to the west. As the sun climbed higher, the shadow would shorten, swinging around until, at its shortest point, it indicated true north in the northern hemisphere. This was the solar noon, the moment the sun reached its highest peak in the sky. Marking that shortest shadow gave the builders an unwavering north-south line. But how could they be sure they had it exactly right? With no modern tools to confirm their findings, they turned to the grand calendar of the sky itself, observing the sun's behavior across the entire year. The solstices and equinoxes provided the crucial checkpoints. On the summer solstice, the sun rises at its most northerly point on the horizon and casts a uniquely short noon shadow. On the winter solstice, it rises at its most southerly point, creating the longest noon shadow of the year. The equinoxes, when day and night are of equal length, see the sun rising directly due east and setting directly due west. By patiently tracking these extreme and midpoint positions, an ancient surveyor could correct any minor errors and establish the cardinal directions with stunning, almost unthinkable accuracy. This was not a guess, it was a repeatable, verifiable geometric proof written in light and shadow. This simple rod, the gnomon, became the foundational instrument for civilizations separated by vast oceans. From the sun-baked plains of Egypt to the meticulous courts of China, this tool was their universal standard for measurement. Its purpose extended far beyond telling time. By carefully observing the path of its shadow's tip throughout the day, a surveyor was essentially drawing a curve on the earth. This curve held all the information they needed. The shortest shadow of the day, as we know, pointed north, but the true genius was in the repetition. They did not rely on a single day's observation. They would mark the shadow's tip at the same time every day, perhaps at sunrise, for weeks or even months. They would notice how that point moved over time, tracing a longer arc across the ground in summer and a shorter one in winter. By finding the midpoint between these seasonal extremes, they could pinpoint the exact east-west line with incredible reliability. This was not magic. It was a patient, physical form of geometry. The gnomon was their protractor, and the ground was their chart. Its enduring lesson is profound. The most sophisticated urban plans, the grandest temples facing the solstice sunrise, all began with the silent, patient tracking of a single shadow cast by a stick in the dirt. That single shadow tracing a curve on the ground was more than just a marker. It was a precise geometric diagram. Ancient surveyors were not merely observers. They were mathematicians who understood the invisible triangles forming between the sun, the tip of the gnomon, and the end of its shadow. The gnomon's height and the shadow's length created the two shorter sides of a right-angled triangle, with an invisible line of sunlight forming the longest side, the hypotenuse. The relationship between these sides and the angles they formed was the heart of their craft. This was an early, physical form of trigonometry, practiced centuries before it was formally named. By carefully measuring the length of the shadow at a specific moment, like solar noon on a solstice, they could calculate the sun's altitude. This angle was not random. It was directly tied to their position on Earth, their latitude. A longer shadow at noon meant they were farther from the equator. A shorter shadow meant they were closer. This is how they could place a city precisely within the world, using nothing but a measured stick and its shadow. These mathematical relationships were so vital they were often treated as sacred knowledge, encoded in texts or guarded by master builders' guilds. This union of shadow and calculation allowed for more than just functional orientation. It enabled a symbolic connection. A temple could be designed so the sun's rays, at a specific date, would shine directly down its main axis, illuminating the inner sanctum. The city grid itself could be aligned with the cosmos, making the urban plan a reflection of the celestial order. So how did this profound mathematical knowledge translate into the stones of a real city, rising from an empty plain? The Grand Avenue of the Dead cuts a straight line through the ancient city of Teotihuacan, but it does not point to true north. Instead, this magnificent roadway is offset by precisely 15.5 degrees to the east. This was no error. It was a deliberate and profound alignment to the cosmos. Built over 2,000 years ago in the highlands of Mexico, the entire city was a monumental clockwork of stone. Its colossal pyramids and platforms were oriented to capture key solar events, such as the sun setting directly behind the Pyramid of the Sun on the day it passed directly overhead. To achieve such a specific angle, the city's original surveyors almost certainly used the gnomon. They would have tracked the sun's path across the seasons, marking the extremes of its shadow. But they went a step further. They likely used the distant horizon as a fixed backdrop, noting the exact points where the sun rose and set on pivotal days of their calendar. This fusion of the simple ground-level gnomon with permanent horizon markers allowed them to lock in an alignment that was both astronomically precise and culturally vital. This orientation was woven into the very fabric of life. It dictated the timing of religious ceremonies that echoed through the Grand Plaza and synchronized the agricultural cycle for the entire surrounding valley. The city itself was a sacred landscape, a physical model of a universe understood through the sun's journey. This sophisticated celestial knowledge, developed entirely independently in the Americas, forces us to reconsider a narrow history. It reveals a universal human impulse to map the heavens onto the earth, a story that finds a powerful echo on the other side of the world, along the banks of the Nile. Across the world, the banks of the Nile witnessed a similar obsession with celestial order, but here the precision reached an almost divine level of exactitude. In ancient Egypt, the alignment of a temple was not merely an architectural choice. It was a theological necessity. The great temples of Karnak and Luxor were engineered so that on the solstice, the rising sun would send a beam of light shooting directly down the main axis through a series of courtyards and halls to illuminate the inner sanctuary where the god statue resided. This was light as a divine herald, a physical manifestation of a god's presence, and its timing had to be flawless. To achieve this, the Egyptians turned their most monumental stone structures into giant surveying instruments. They used towering obelisks, their sides clad in electrum to catch the first rays of dawn, as colossal gnomons. The long, sharp shadows cast by these stone needles would fall along the paved processional ways, providing a visual guide that stretched for hundreds of feet, confirming the alignment was true. This was not a one-time event. Priests and surveyors, known as rope stretchers for their measuring cords, would have monitored these shadows throughout the year. They employed an instrument called the merkhet, a horizontal bar with a plumb line, to track the movement of specific stars and the sun's shadow. By observing how a shadow bisected angles marked on a quartz floor, they could establish perfectly perpendicular axes, the very foundation of their rigid, rectangular temple plans. This sacred geometry was more than construction, it was cosmology in stone. It physically demonstrated the pharaoh's power as the mediator between the gods and the people, the one who maintained the cosmic order, or mat, on earth. The Egyptian benchmark for solar alignment was so high it forces us to look at every other ancient culture with fresh eyes, questioning how they too might have encoded their own understanding of the heavens into the layout of their streets and homes. These solar milestones, the solstices and equinoxes, were more than just dates on a calendar. They were the architectural keystones for entire civilizations. Imagine the power of a single day, the equinox, when the sun rises in a perfect, unwavering line due east. For a surveyor standing on an empty plain, that sunrise was an unmissable signal. It provided a celestial guarantee, a fixed line in space that could be translated directly into the foundation of a main street or a grand ceremonial avenue. This was not just about symmetry. An east-west axis aligned with the equinox meant the city would be bathed in balanced light, with the low-angled sun of morning and evening reaching deep into its heart. It created a natural rhythm for daily life, from the opening of market stalls to the closing of city gates. But the sun's journey is not static. It swings like a pendulum between two extremes, the solstices. The summer solstice marks the sun's northernmost sunrise, while the winter solstice marks its southernmost. By tracking these outer limits, a planner could understand the full arc of the sun's annual dance. A building's orientation could then be fine-tuned for practical needs. A temple might be angled to capture the low, warm light of the winter solstice sunrise, a symbol of rebirth during the darkest time of year. A palace courtyard could be positioned to avoid the harsh, high summer sun, staying cool in the hottest months. This deep integration of celestial cycles transformed a mere settlement into a living entity that breathed with the seasons. Its streets echoed the sun's path, its public spaces celebrated its turning points. The city became a microcosm of the cosmos itself, a place where human time and celestial time were one and the same. For such a profound connection to be possible, the observations had to be flawless. This necessity drove the creation of ever more sophisticated tools for reading the sky. That growing desire for perfection in celestial alignment drove the invention of tools far more complex than a simple rod in the ground. The Egyptian merkhet, for instance, transformed stargazing into a precise science. This instrument consisted of a horizontal palm rib with a notch at one end, used in conjunction with a plumb line. A surveyor would use a pair of these devices. One man, the stargazer, would sight a specific star through the notch of his merkhet, while his partner, some distance away, would align his own merkhet to the same celestial target. The taut, perfectly vertical plumb lines created an impeccable reference line across the dark desert, a line that could then be transferred to the ground to lay out the foundation of a pyramid or temple with breathtaking accuracy. This method was so reliable it could correct for the slight cumulative errors that might creep in when using only the sun's shadow over vast construction projects. Meanwhile, in ancient Greece, engineers developed the dioptra, a revolutionary device that can be thought of as the grandfather of the modern theodolite. It featured a sighting tube mounted on a flat, graduated disc. By rotating this tube and locking it into position, a surveyor could measure horizontal and vertical angles with remarkable precision. This was the key to conquering uneven terrain. No longer was a perfectly flat plain a necessity. With a dioptra, an engineer could stand on a hill, sight a distant mountain peak, and calculate the exact angle needed to run a straight aqueduct or a perfectly oriented road across valleys and over ridges, ensuring the sacred alignment was maintained for miles. These tools were not just technological upgrades, they were manifestations of a new ambition to impose celestial order onto any landscape, no matter how complex. This ambition would be put to its ultimate test in the most extreme environments on Earth, high in the Andes Mountains. High in the thin air of the Andes, the Incas performed a kind of architectural magic, bending entire cities to the sun's will. Their capital, Cusco, was designed in the shape of a puma, a sacred animal, but its true genius lay in the stones of the Coricancha, the temple of the sun. Here, perfectly aligned windows and niches acted like a camera obscura for the gods. On the June solstice, a single beam of sunlight would pierce a specific opening, striking a golden disk within to signal the start of a new cycle. The entire complex was a precision-engineered calendar, its walls serving as fixed reference points against the moving sun. This was not a solitary observatory, but the central node in a vast network of light. On the horizon surrounding Cusco, the Incas erected a series of pillars on the hilltops. These stone towers were not random markers. They formed a giant crown around the city, a celestial spiderweb. A surveyor would watch from the Coricancha as the sun's rising or setting position slid from one pillar to the next throughout the year. The shadow cast by a specific pillar at a certain time of year would indicate the optimal moment to plant potatoes or to celebrate a festival. This system translated the abstract passage of time into a visible, physical event anyone could witness. How did this knowledge travel across an empire spanned by some of the world's most rugged terrain, from deep valleys to soaring peaks? The answer was a decentralized yet unified system of practice. Master surveyors, likely priests or skilled engineers, understood the core principles. They knew how to establish a local baseline using a simple gnomon, and then calibrate their findings against the prominent horizon features of their specific valley. They did not need a map from Cusco. They needed the knowledge of how to read their own landscape in concert with the sun. This empowered local planners to orient agricultural terraces to maximize sunlight and warmth, preventing frost and extending growing seasons. It guided the construction of roads that followed the sun-warmed slopes, and it dictated the layout of administrative centers that mirrored the cosmic order of the capital. This brilliant adaptation made the empire resilient. Every valley, every new settlement could align itself perfectly with the solar cycle, binding the entire territory to the rhythm of the sun god Inti, and by extension to the divine authority of the Inca emperor himself. The system was so effective it makes you wonder, did this ancient, sun-driven logic simply vanish, or was it quietly absorbed into the foundations of our modern world? That knowledge of light and stone was never meant to be confined by mountains or seas. It traveled, carried along dusty trade routes by merchants and scholars, moving with conquering armies and migrating artisans. The geometric principles perfected along the Nile found eager students in ancient Greece. Greek mathematicians and planners absorbed Egyptian techniques for land measurement and celestial alignment, refining them with their own philosophical rigor. This fusion of knowledge is etched into the stones of cities like Priene. Its streets form a perfect grid, a rational and orderly plan where every block is aligned to the cardinal directions. This was not a haphazard layout. It was a deliberate application of imported solar geometry, creating a city that felt balanced, logical, and in harmony with the cosmos. The principles did not stop there. Centuries later, the Roman engineer Vitruvius compiled his great work, De Architectura. In its pages, he systematically laid out the methods for orienting a city. He instructed builders to use the gnomon to find the cardinal directions and explained how to lay out streets according to the sun's path and the prevailing winds. This text became a vital bridge, carrying the accumulated solar wisdom of Egypt, Greece, and Mesopotamia forward in time, directly into the hands of Roman engineers who would spread this knowledge across their vast empire. This cross-pollination reveals a profound truth. The science of shadows was a cumulative human achievement. It was not a secret discovered once and lost, but a body of knowledge that grew richer as it passed from one culture to the next, each adding their own insights and refinements. This shared legacy is not locked away in ancient ruins. You can still walk through it today. The enduring street patterns of old cities across Europe and the Mediterranean often whisper of this ancient solar logic, a ghost of a shadow cast by a gnomon thousands of years ago. Vitruvius left us the instruction manual for this solar geometry. In his 1st century BCE architectural treatise, he meticulously detailed the process of using a gnomon to lay out a city. He instructed builders to first trace the full arc of the shadow's tip from morning to evening. Then came the crucial step, bisecting the angle formed between the two extreme points of that arc. This careful geometric division would yield a perfect north-south line, a true meridian. With that one axis established, the entire street grid could be plotted with mathematical certainty. This was not just about cosmic harmony, it was about human well-being. Vitruvius argued passionately for orienting streets to capture the sun's warmth in winter and to channel cooling breezes in summer. He understood that a building's placement directly affected the health of its inhabitants, preventing dampness and stagnation. This Roman approach was deeply pragmatic, transforming the sacred art of alignment into a systematic science for public welfare. The legacy of this thinking is written in stone across the ancient world. The ruins of Roman colonial towns, from Timgad in North Africa to Silchester in Britain, all share this telltale grid, their main streets often aligned with the cardinal directions as if drawn by the same sun-worshipping hand. But Vitruvius was not inventing these methods, he was codifying knowledge that was already ancient in his time. His text is a snapshot of a mature discipline, a bridge between the lost oral traditions of master builders and the written word. How do we know his instructions were actually followed? The proof is not just in the grand ruins, but in the subtle patterns of light and shadow that still fall upon their ancient floors. The ruins of Timgad in Algeria offer a perfect fossil of this solar logic. Here, the Roman grid is so precise it feels like a diagram drawn on the earth itself. Two main streets, the Cardo and the Decumanus, cross at a perfect right angle, forming the city's backbone. The Decumanus runs precisely east-west, while the Cardo runs north-south, a direct translation of gnomon-derived cardinal directions into urban form. This was not an abstract exercise. During the city's founding ritual, a team of surveyors known as agrimensors would have driven their gnomon into the virgin soil. They would have marked the shadow's path with solemn ceremony, using the sun's own motion to bless and validate the city's layout. The resulting grid was a masterstroke of imperial efficiency. It allowed for the rapid deployment of troops down straight, predictable avenues. It standardized property plots, simplifying taxation and administration. Every citizen, from the highest official to the lowest merchant, lived and worked within a framework dictated by the sun. This was Roman authority made visible, a declaration that even the untamed landscape would now bow to a rational cosmic order. You can still walk the stones of the decumanus today and feel that intention. But the story does not end with the fall of Rome. The ghost of the Roman grid lingers in the street patterns of many modern European cities, layered over by centuries of subsequent construction. This persistence makes you wonder what happened to the knowledge behind the grid. When the Roman world fractured, the sophisticated, systematic science of the agrimensors did not simply vanish. Instead, it fragmented. The deep, mathematical understanding of solar geometry retreated into isolated monasteries or became the guarded secret of a few master masons building cathedrals. For the average medieval town planner, the immediate needs of defense and local geography often overruled the grand cosmic blueprint. A new street might follow an old cow path, or a town would grow organically within the protective walls of a castle, its alignment shaped more by the lie of the land than by the path of the sun. The universal language of shadows, once so critical for founding cities, began to fade from common practice, becoming a specialized art rather than a foundational science. Why would such a powerful and practical tool be allowed to slip into obscurity? The grand Roman grid began to dissolve into a tangle of winding lanes. As centralized authority crumbled, the meticulous science of the agrimensors, the master surveyors, no longer had an empire to serve. Their profound understanding of solar geometry did not vanish in a single day, but it slowly faded from common practice, becoming a fragmented and specialized art. In this new medieval world, the urgent need for defense often dictated a town's shape. A settlement would huddle within the protective shadow of a castle keep, its streets following the contours of a hill or the meandering path of an old riverbed, not the perfect lines of the sun. The cosmic blueprint was abandoned for the logic of immediate survival. Yet the human desire to connect the earthly and the divine did not disappear. It simply found a new expression within the walls of monasteries. Here in quiet cloisters, monks became the new guardians of the sun's secrets. They carefully oriented their churches, not to the cardinal points of a Roman grid, but to a more symbolic dawn. A church's altar was often placed in the east, so that on the feast day of its patron saint, the rising sun would stream directly through a specific window, bathing the sacred space in a divine light. This was solar alignment repurposed, its geometric precision softened into a powerful tool for Christian liturgy and spiritual metaphor. The deep knowledge was kept alive, but it was no longer a public science for city building. It was a sacred craft for soul building. This long medieval interlude, where the sun's path was remembered more for its symbolism than its geometry, would last for centuries. The reawakening began not with a new invention, but with the rediscovery of an old one. In the flourishing intellectual climate of the Renaissance, scholars unearthed and translated the forgotten texts of Vitruvius. His precise instructions for using a gnomon to lay out a city were a revelation. Here was a complete system, a rational and beautiful method for imposing order on the world, and it spoke directly to the Renaissance mind. This was more than just a recovery of technique. It was a revival of an entire philosophy, one that saw human habitation as an extension of a harmonious cosmos. Architects and artists, inspired by this classical ideal, began to consciously reintegrate solar principles into their designs, seeking both the practical benefits of light and air and the aesthetic perfection of mathematical proportion. This journey from lost to rediscovery forces a humbling question. How many other elegant solutions, born from a deep observation of the natural world, have we forgotten and are only now, with our advanced tools, beginning to recognize again? The rediscovered texts of Vitruvius gave us the theory, but the silent stones themselves hold the final proof. Across the globe, archaeologists are now unearthing the physical instruments of this solar science. At Machu Picchu, excavators found carefully placed stone markers. their positions aligning perfectly with the June solstice sunrise. These were not decorative features, they were fixed gnomons, their shadows designed to fall along specific lines on the citadel's sacred plaza at a precise moment. In a similar vein, recent lidar scans of the ground around Stonehenge have revealed a stunning pattern. Hidden beneath the turf are the ghosts of ancient post holes arranged in a wide circle. These long-vanished timber posts would have cast a web of shadows, a monumental surveying device used to calibrate the placement of the massive sarsen stones that followed. This technology allows us to see what the naked eye cannot, mapping subtle earthworks and pathways that form a vast celestial diagram across the landscape. This accumulation of evidence is transformative. A single curious alignment at a temple could be dismissed as coincidence, but finding calibrated gnomons, multiple horizon markers, and systematic post holes across different sites and continents confirms a global pattern of intentional, high-precision work. These ancient surveyors did not rely on a single observation point. They established networks of reference markers, sometimes spanning miles, to triangulate their alignments with breathtaking accuracy. The entire process becomes visible, from the initial gnomon in the center of a planned city to the distant hilltop pillars that locked in the solstice lines. These physical clues pulled from the earth do more than just confirm ancient ingenuity, they offer a profound lesson. This was a form of design deeply attuned to its environment, using a limitless, clean energy source, the sun, to create cities that were harmonious, efficient, and spiritually resonant. There is a growing movement in modern architecture that looks back to these principles, not with nostalgia, but with a sense of rediscovery. The ancient practice of solar orientation is being studied again for its potential in sustainable design, to reduce energy consumption and create buildings that work with the natural climate rather than fighting against it. The lost language of shadows is slowly being translated into a blueprint for our future. That ancient blueprint for living with the sun is no longer a relic, it is a revolution in modern design. Architects today are actively mining these historical principles to combat one of our greatest challenges, energy consumption. The practice is called passive solar design, and its core principle is a direct echo of the gnomon's wisdom, orienting a building to work in concert with the sun's annual journey. A structure is positioned so its largest windows face within 30 degrees of true south in the northern hemisphere, welcoming the low, warming rays of the winter sun deep into its interior. At the same time, carefully calculated roof overhangs act like a built-in sundial, blocking the high, harsh summer sun to keep the building naturally cool. This is not about adding complex technology, but about subtracting needless energy used through intelligent placement, a lesson learned from cities like Teotihuacan and Preen. The entire approach is a form of architectural biomimicry, where we learn from 2,000 years of proven, on-the-ground experimentation. What were the ancients optimizing for if not comfort, health, and harmony with their environment, the very goals of sustainable design today? This revival extends beyond individual buildings to the scale of entire neighborhoods. New eco-districts are being planned with street grids that channel cooling summer breezes and orient homes to create communal sun traps, just as Vitruvius prescribed. The materials themselves are part of the equation, using thermal mass like stone or concrete to absorb daytime solar heat and release it slowly through the cool night, a technique perfected in the thick walls of desert temples and pueblos. This is more than just energy efficiency. It is about re-establishing a human connection to the rhythms of the natural world. We are rediscovering that a room filled with morning light does not just save electricity, it elevates our mood and syncs our internal clocks. The most profound benefit of this ancient wisdom may not be measured in kilowatts, but in the quality of light that shapes our daily lives. This spiritual dimension transformed the city from a mere collection of buildings into a living map of the cosmos. For the Maya, the precise orientation of a city's main axis was a sacred act, a way of anchoring their world to the rhythms of the gods. At sites like Chichen Itza, the Grand Pyramid of El Castillo is a masterpiece of this celestial encoding. On the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun casts a shadow along its northern staircase, creating the undulating illusion of a giant serpent slithering down from the heavens to earth. This was not a clever architectural trick for tourists, it was a profound theological statement. It represented the descent of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity, a moment that synchronized the human calendar with a divine narrative repeated year after year. The entire city was a stage for this cosmic drama, its streets and temples positioned to make these sacred moments visible and tangible for every citizen. This symbolic alignment served a powerful social function. It reinforced the authority of the king and the priestly class, who were seen as the intermediaries capable of orchestrating this harmony between the earthly and celestial realms. The city's layout was proof of their divine mandate, a permanent reminder that the social order itself was a reflection of the cosmic order. To live within that perfectly oriented grid was to be constantly aware of your place not just in the city, but in the entire universe. This deep spiritual layer reveals that ancient surveying was never just a technical discipline. The gnomon and the measuring cord were tools of both science and religion, used to translate myth into masonry. The perfect east-west line was a prayer made visible, an act of devotion etched into the landscape. It challenges our modern, purely functional view of urban planning. We design for traffic flow and utility access, but what deeper meaning does that impart? What stories are our streets telling? The ancient approach suggests that the most enduring cities are those that offer their inhabitants not just shelter, but a sense of place within a grand, meaningful cosmos. Even the most skilled surveyor could not command the sky. A single overcast day could erase the sun's guiding shadow, halting the sacred work of laying out a city. They faced a world of tangible obstacles, from jagged mountain ranges to dense, unyielding forests that blocked the horizon. Their quest for perfect alignment was a constant battle against an imperfect world. Perhaps their most elusive adversary was time itself, on a scale they could scarcely perceive. The Earth wobbles on its axis in a slow 26,000-year cycle called precession. This gradual shift meant that a star used to mark true north would slowly drift, and the sun's rising point on the equinox would creep along the horizon over centuries. A temple perfectly aligned in one generation might be slightly off for their great-grandchildren, a silent testament to a moving cosmos. So how did they compensate for a sky that would not hold still? They built in redundancy. A master surveyor would not rely on the sun alone. On clear nights, they would turn to the fixed stars, using instruments like the merkhet to sight the unchanging celestial poles, providing a second, more stable reference to verify their solar measurements. For remote or difficult locations, they developed portable versions of their tools, a calibrated gnomon that could be carried to a hilltop to find a clear line of sight above the tree line. Their solutions were brilliant, but they were still approximations. The perfect orientation was a theoretical ideal, a North Star they steered toward, knowing they might never fully reach it. This reality makes their surviving achievements all the more remarkable. It was not the work of infallible supermen, but of dedicated problem solvers refining their craft against relentless natural forces. The constraints of their environment did not stifle their innovation. They fueled it, forcing a creativity that resonates deeply with any modern engineer staring down a difficult problem. This universal struggle against the elements raises a final, compelling question. If the challenges were so great, How did their specific solutions differ from the deserts of Egypt to the rainforests of the Maya? The landscape itself wrote the rules for how these solar techniques could be used. In the vast, open deserts of Egypt, the stage was perfectly set for this science. With endless clear skies and a flat, unobstructed horizon, a surveyor's gnomon cast a sharp, unambiguous shadow from sunrise to sunset. There were no trees to diffuse the light, no hills to block the view. Every measurement was clean, every line precise. This ideal laboratory allowed for an almost obsessive focus on solar and stellar alignment, resulting in the breathtaking accuracy we still marvel at today. But transplant that same Egyptian surveyor to the dense jungles of a Maya city-state, and his methods would fail instantly. The closed canopy would blot out the sun for most of the day, and the tangled horizon offered no clear reference points. Here, the challenge was not achieving precision, but achieving any line of sight at all. The Maya response was brilliant and pragmatic. They constructed towering stone pyramids, not just as temples, but as elevated surveying platforms. By ascending above the rainforest canopy, a priest astronomer could finally observe the sun's path and the stars, turning the roof of the jungle into their new, artificial desert plain. They also became masters of the zenith passage, the moment the sun passes directly overhead, a uniquely important event in the tropics that casts no shadow at all, a phenomenon useless to builders in higher latitudes. This was not a failure to replicate Egyptian methods. It was a superior adaptation to a completely different environment. Similarly, coastal civilizations like the Phoenicians faced a different kind of obstacle: hazy horizons and frequent sea fog that could obscure the sun at critical moments. Their solution was to create a hybrid system. They still used the sun by day, but they heavily supplemented it with stellar navigation and observations of the moon to cross-check their bearings. This fusion of celestial bodies created a resilient, multi-layered orientation technique that could weather literal and figurative storms. This incredible diversity proves that solar surveying was a fluid intelligence, not a rigid dogma. It was a set of core principles that were endlessly customized to fit the local reality, whether that meant building a platform to see over the trees or learning to read the stars as a backup to the sun. This adaptability raises a deeper question. If the methods were so flexible, why did these cultures go to such extreme lengths to use the sun at all, when simpler, more terrestrial methods of orientation were always available? The sun was not the only guide in the ancient sky. For the Polynesian voyagers who settled a vast ocean empire, the sun's path was a daily rhythm, but the stars were their true compass. They navigated thousands of miles across the open Pacific by memorizing star paths, the precise points where specific stars rose and set on the horizon. A settlement's location might be chosen because its bay aligned with the setting point of a navigational star, but the layout of the village itself, the placement of homes and communal spaces, almost always bowed to the sun. The star compass was for the journey, the solar alignment was for living. This distinction reveals a brilliant pragmatism in how ancient peoples selected their celestial tools. The sun offered an immediate, tangible benefit for daily life. Its path directly governed warmth, light, and the seasonal cycles of agriculture. A city street aligned to the winter sun could mean the difference between a comfortable home and a frigid one. Stars, while incredibly precise for long-range navigation, were less practical for the granular needs of urban design. Their light did not warm the stones of a house, and they were invisible for half of every day. This was not a contest between systems, but a masterful collaboration. A culture could use the unwavering pole star to find true north as a foundational check, then use the sun's daily journey to fine-tune the orientation of every building within that grand framework. They were playing a cosmic duet, using the stars to set the stage and the sun to direct the daily performance of life. This interplay between the stellar and the solar underscores a sophisticated, multi-layered understanding of the cosmos. It was not about choosing one over the other, but about knowing which celestial body was the right tool for the task at hand. This holistic approach to celestial engineering required more than just observation. It demanded a framework to predict and plan, a system of mathematics that could turn observed patterns into precise, repeatable blueprints. That mathematical foundation was a silent language, spoken not in words but in angles and proportions. The geometry of shadows was a form of practical trigonometry, a science of triangles that allowed ancient surveyors to measure the world. The principle was elegantly simple. A gnomon of a known height, say 6 feet tall, was like one side of a right-angled triangle. Its shadow, stretching across the ground, formed the second side. The beam of sunlight connecting the tip of the gnomon to the tip of the shadow was the invisible hypotenuse. Once you knew 2 elements of this triangle, you could calculate everything else. At solar noon, when the shadow pointed true north, its length was the key. A longer shadow meant the sun was lower in the sky, indicating a location farther from the equator. A shorter shadow meant the sun was higher, placing them closer to the equator. By carefully measuring the shadow's length against the gnomon's known height, they could derive the sun's altitude angle and thus determine their precise latitude. This was not a vague estimation. It was a repeatable calculation that allowed a master planner in Egypt to know his position on the globe with the same certainty as a planner in Mesopotamia. This geometric certainty was the bedrock upon which they built their perfect alignments. But how did a single calculation on a small patch of ground translate into the grand scale of a city grid stretching for miles? The answer lies in the power of ratios and proportions. The relationship between the gnomon's height and its shadow length created a fixed ratio, a constant that could be scaled up infinitely. If the gnomon's height was 1 unit and the shadow's length was, for example, 2 units at a specific latitude, that 1:2 ratio could be applied to any other measurement. This is how they could take a small, carefully measured model of a city, laid out on a temple floor, and replicate it perfectly across a vast territory. They would use the same geometric principles to project the main axis outward, using chains of similar triangles to ensure that every new street remained parallel and every intersection stayed a perfect right angle, even over rolling hills. This mathematical sophistication reveals a profound truth about these ancient civilizations. Their urban planning was a rigorous science, grounded in empirical data and logical deduction. The placement of a temple was not just a spiritual act, it was the solution to a complex geometric problem. This invites a deeper curiosity. How was this intricate knowledge, this language of angles and shadows, preserved and passed down through generations without the textbooks and diagrams we rely on today? This knowledge was far too vital to be left to chance. Without formal schools or textbooks, the master surveyor and his apprentice formed the essential link in a chain of wisdom stretching back centuries. The training was intensely practical, a silent dialogue of observation and imitation. A young student would spend years at his master's side, first learning to prepare the level ground for the gnomon, then to mark the shadow's tip with unwavering precision at the exact moment of solar noon. They used sand tables for initial lessons, drawing perfect circles and bisecting angles with a stylus before ever touching a measuring cord in the field. This was geometry you could feel with your hands. In ancient India, this practical knowledge was encoded into mathematical sutras, concise poetic verses that were easier to memorize and recite. A single verse could contain the entire procedure for laying out a ceremonial altar using the sun's shadow. turning a complex geometric operation into a memorable chant. This fusion of oral tradition and hands-on practice created a resilient educational system. The master did not just teach a skill, he instilled a worldview, a reverence for the celestial order that his student would one day translate into stone. The survival of these techniques across dozens of generations was not an accident. It was the direct result of this dedicated person-to-person transmission, where the failure of a single apprentice could mean the loss of sacred alignments for an entire city. The community of builders was the living library. This deep reliance on mentorship and memory makes the precision of their surviving work all the more astounding. How can we, with our digital tools and satellites, even begin to appreciate the subtle genius of a line laid out 2,000 years ago? We can now test these ancient alignments with a digital gnomon. Software like Google Earth and specialized astronomy programs allow researchers to input any date and location, then watch as a virtual sun casts its shadow across a reconstructed landscape. This digital precision has settled long-standing debates. At Angkor Wat, for example, scholars long theorized that the main temple tower was designed to align with the equinox sunrise. Using these modern tools, they virtually recreated the sky as it appeared in the 12th century. The simulation confirmed it perfectly. The rising sun on the spring equinox would have crowned the central tower, a dramatic event encoded into the very stones. This technological verification does more than just confirm a hypothesis. It makes the invisible genius of the ancient architects visible to everyone. You can sit at your computer and witness the same celestial alignment that a Khmer priest observed 800 years ago, bridging the gap between past and present with a click. These tools also reveal the incredible intentionality behind every measurement. When a digital reconstruction shows that a processional avenue aligns not just roughly east, but to the specific sunrise of a founding king's coronation date, it proves the design was meticulously planned. This newfound ability to see through the eyes of ancient surveyors deepens our respect for their work, transforming mysterious ruins into calculated, purposeful monuments. It also prompts a fascinating new question. With this digital proof in hand, we can begin to see the distinct cultural fingerprints each civilization left on this universal science of the sun. This diversity of solar logic becomes vividly clear when comparing the river plains of Mesopotamia with the ordered landscapes of ancient China. In Mesopotamia, the towering ziggurat was the city's heart, a man-made mountain designed to bridge the earth and the heavens. Its alignment was not a matter of civic convenience but of divine necessity. Priests meticulously tracked the movements of the sun, moon, and planets, using these celestial paths to orient their temples. A ziggurat staircase might face the rising sun on a specific god's feast day, ensuring the deity's favor flowed directly into the city. The sun here was a powerful, often capricious god, and the city's layout was a form of cosmic diplomacy, an attempt to align human affairs with the will of the heavens. This produced a skyline punctuated by massive religious structures, each one a calibrated instrument for celestial observation. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Chinese planners were weaving the sun's path into a more holistic system. Their approach was governed by feng shui, the art of harmonizing human structures with the natural flow of energy, or Qi. Solar orientation was just one thread in a much larger tapestry that included wind patterns, watercourses, and the shapes of surrounding mountains. A capital city like Chang'an was laid out as a perfect rectangle, its walls and major gates aligned to the cardinal directions, a decision rooted in the gnomon's reliable geometry. Yet this solar grid was not an end in itself. It was the stable foundation upon which the more subtle calculations of feng shui could be built. The main palace might be positioned to capture the auspicious southern light while being shielded from malevolent northern winds, and its doors oriented to channel beneficial Chi into the heart of the empire. The sun was not a deity to be appeased but a vital source of yang energy, a practical force to be harnessed for health, prosperity, and social stability. These contrasting approaches reveal a profound truth about ancient science. The same geometric principle, the same understanding of a shadow's path, could lead to entirely different urban forms. In Mesopotamia, the city reached for the gods, its form dictated by celestial events. In China, the city nestled into the landscape, its solar alignment serving a broader philosophy of earthly balance. One culture saw the sky as a realm of powerful beings, the other as a source of natural order. This rich tapestry of interpretation shows that the gnomon was a universal tool, but the cities it helped build were deeply, uniquely local. They were physical expressions of what a culture believed about its place in the cosmos, written in the silent language of streets and walls. New York's famous grid, laid out in 1811, is a direct descendant of that ancient solar logic. Its long, straight avenues running north-south and east-west create a rational order that echoes the Roman Cardo and Decumanus. This was not a mystical choice, but a profoundly practical one, designed to maximize the number of rectangular building lots and simplify navigation in a rapidly growing city. The orientation ensures that sunlight can reach into the canyons between skyscrapers, providing light and air in a dense urban environment. This is the ghost of the gnomon at work, a principle of solar orientation so effective it has been copied for centuries. You can find similar grids in cities from Chicago to Barcelona, their street patterns whispering of a time when the sun dictated the most efficient way to lay out a community. Today, a city planner uses satellites and GPS to achieve in seconds what took ancient surveyors weeks of patient observation. Yet the fundamental goal remains unchanged: to create a legible, functional, and healthy urban space aligned with the natural world. This enduring practicality is a powerful argument for looking backward as we plan forward. Our ancestors developed these alignments through trial and error over millennia, arriving at solutions that conserved energy and enhanced daily life long before those terms became modern buzzwords. Their wisdom offers a blueprint for sustainable design that is literally written in the streets we walk every day. So why have we largely set aside this holistic approach in favor of more haphazard, car-centric sprawl? The legacy is there, waiting to be rediscovered and integrated with our current technology. This silent conversation between the ancient and the modern pushes us to ask what other urban mysteries remain hidden in plain sight, encoded in the angles of our oldest city streets. Even with our advanced tools, the ancient ground still holds its secrets tightly. The debate over intentionality is one of the most heated in archaeology today. Take the Nazca lines in Peru, those immense geoglyphs etched into the desert floor. Some researchers point to certain lines that align with the solstice sun, arguing they were laid out using solar gnomon techniques. Others counter that these alignments are statistically inevitable over such a vast area, and that the lines were likely ceremonial pathways for water rituals, their orientation a secondary concern. This is the core of the controversy, the constant tension between pattern and purpose. It is dangerously easy for us to project our own scientific worldview onto the past, to see a perfect alignment and assume it was engineered with the same intent a modern surveyor would have. Scholars urging caution remind us that the symbolic mind of an ancient culture might have operated on a different logic entirely, one where a mountain spirit was more important than a cardinal direction. These debates are not just academic squabbles, they highlight the profound challenge of interpreting an incomplete record. We have the stones they left behind, but we have lost the stories, the oral traditions, and the daily context that gave those stones their meaning. This inherent mystery is precisely what keeps the field so alive. It is a dynamic puzzle where a fresh pair of eyes, even an amateur enthusiast studying satellite imagery from their home computer, can spot a new alignment or propose a compelling connection. The quest is open to anyone curious enough to look up at the sky and then down at the ancient maps we are still learning to read. You can become a shadow detective on your next visit to an ancient ruin. The first clue is often the widest avenue or the most prominent building. Stand at one end of a long processional way and pull out your phone's compass app. If that avenue points roughly east-west, you are likely standing on a path designed for equinox sunrises or sunsets. A structure aligned closer to northeast might be waiting for the summer solstice sun, while one facing southeast could be a winter solstice target. Watch how the shadows behave at different times of the day, and especially during different seasons. Notice where the shadows of pillars or doorways fall. Do they bisect a specific stone? Do they point toward an altar? These are not accidents. They are frozen moments of a celestial calendar waiting for you to read them. This initial observation is just the beginning. To truly understand the alignment, you must dig into the cultural story. A temple facing the winter solstice sunrise in a northern climate is not just an architectural feat. It is a profound symbol of hope, designed to capture the first returning light after the longest night. In an agricultural society, an alignment with the spring equinox could mark the vital beginning of the planting season. Knowing the why transforms a curious line of stones into a narrative of human survival, belief, and celebration. Your personal observations can even contribute to a larger body of knowledge. Many archaeological projects now welcome crowdsourced data from visitors who document shadow patterns and alignments with photos and notes, adding pieces to a puzzle that professionals cannot always solve alone. This active engagement does more than just solve a mystery. It forges a tangible link between you and the ancient mind that first plotted that line, using the same sun that shines down on you today. This direct connection makes the grand story of celestial engineering personal, reminding us that the most sophisticated systems were built from simple, observable truths anyone can learn to see. Our journey ends not with a mystery solved, but with a connection restored. This universal quest for cosmic harmony, written in stone and shadow, shows us a humanity deeply attuned to its place in the universe. From the single gnomon marking its quiet arc to the breathtaking scale of Teotihuacan's Celestial Avenue, we have traced a lineage of genius. It was a fusion of keen science, profound spirituality, and everyday practicality, a combination that gave birth to cities designed not just for living, but for meaning. These master planners, armed with little more than patience and observation, achieved a precision that still commands our respect, proving that ingenuity can flourish even without advanced technology. Their legacy is a powerful lesson for our own time, a blueprint for sustainable design that works with the sun rather than against it. The next time you walk a city street, pause for a moment. Look at the angle of the sunlight between the buildings. That light may be following a path laid down thousands of years ago, an invisible line drawn by an ancient surveyor reading a shadow. We would love to hear if you have noticed these alignments in your own city or travels, so share your discoveries in the comments below. If you enjoyed unraveling this historical mystery with us, subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Together, let's keep pulling on these threads of history and see what other wonders we can uncover.